Hey, what's going on? It's Bosco,
I'm Zach here.
and we're talking about this fucking dumbass movie, Caligula.
The film Caligula, released in 1979, directed by Tinto Brass and Bob Guccione.
Someone look up their hard drives.
It stars Malcolm McDowell and who's that lady in the movie?
Oh, Helen Mirren.
Helen Mirren, yeah. And the film takes place in ancient Rome, and it centers on the titular character of Caligula, the ancient Roman Emperor Caesar Caligula. So it's an interesting film.
All right, we're all dancing around the subject because spoiler alert.
Production.
There's a lot of fucking in it.
One of the producers on this film is Penthouse of also Penthouse magazine.
Yeah, when you said that right before we watched, I was not surprised. I was not surprised whatsoever.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't hate it. The thing is that at a certain point, like, you know, sure, it's you know, it's like, oh yeah, there's sex, okay, but the
movie's pornographic.
Yeah,
it's a pornographic film.
It's for real. It really is. You know, there's been movies where they've tried to go like a legitimate route, but like it's like kind of just a porno film at the end of the day. Like there one movie came to mind. I forget.
This isn't a porno.
Wait, hold on. No. It reminded me of this director Vincent Gallo. He directed this movie called Brown Bunny.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it's just like, you know, like a whatever movie. It's, you know, but like in the middle of it, like straight up the actress just performs fellatio, and like it's like legitimate. It's like, you know what I mean, it's not a stunt cock or anything, you know. And it's like, it's weird, you know. It's like, okay, I thought I was just watching this regular movie, and then
by stunt cock you mean a prosthetic penis?
A prosthetic penis, yes.
Mm-hmm.
But what I was like, it was weird to like watch that movie because I was like, man, it's like, you know, just out of nowhere there's just like a hardcore pornographic scene, and it's not like I'm clutching my pearls or anything, you know, we're all adults here. But I don't know, it's just it's in line with like the 70 exploitation films that I have seen. I definitely think it's an exploitation film for sure.
Okay. Well, before we get into that, just to talk about the movie a little bit, I'll tell you what I liked and what I didn't like.
All right, go ahead. I'll go after you.
So, it's a timepiece film, obviously. It's centered in ancient Rome, where there's not a lot of movies from that era, other than
none whatsoever,
unless you consider Gladiator. But this is on a whole different level of Gladiator.
No, this is I think it's before Gladiator.
Oh, it's before Gladiator for sure.
Yeah.
But it takes a very different approach to any timepiece film you might see, and in terms of how they present the ancient world, the modern film and television industry has a way of making the ancient world seem like filled with sex and violence. You can see this in even modern works, like let's say Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones
sure
got famous on being like, oh, there's graphic sex scenes in here and lots of violence. Caligula is way more heavy in both the violence and the sex.
Yeah, but let's be honest, the violence, you know, I understand, you know, I do enjoy practical effects. You know, but when you see a movie with, I assume this movie didn't have a humongous budget for the time. You know what I mean? It didn't, you know what I mean? It looks rough. It's like in line with the other cult films I've seen as far as like, you know, like quality, you know, like it's kind of got like kind of a lo-fi vibe to it.
Yeah,
almost.
It is very lo-fi.
Yeah, and
it's graphic and it's weirdly lo-fi, which is a weird combo.
Yeah.
I try to think about what the story that the directors were trying to tell here, and my takeaway from it is Caligula is hungry for power from the get-go, because at the start of the film, he's following around his uncle Tiberius. Tiberius is an elderly Caesar.
Real quick,
sure.
How accurate is the movie? In the retelling of his life?
That I don't know. It might
I'm
have
sure
served
it's not
us well to do maybe a little bit of research about that, but
no, we do the way we do our movie reviews is that we do our first impressions. We feel like that's our most genuine take, just like fresh off of it. Because if we did it days after, we would lose the immediate thoughts.
Which is what happened with Gangs in New York.
We watched it, but I think we also, after watching Gangs in New York, we kind of realized even Andrew was like, hey, I understand now that. Anyway, beside the point. Beside the point. Anyway, so back to what you'd liked and didn't like.
Okay, I don't know how historically accurate this is, but my main takeaway from what the story was trying to tell us, what it's trying to give us, is this idea of a corrupt ruler. Because obviously, we're obviously looking here at a Roman Caesar. He's supposed to be the Caesar, and if you know a little bit about Roman history, which I feel like I know enough to speak on this, Caesar wasn't like a full-on dictator. He answered to the Senate.
Senate.
Which,
I'm sorry. I just sorry, real quick. Just like every time I heard the Senate in this movie, I think I said the Senate right after. I can't get that. It's an earworm. Anyway, go on.
So, the Senate acts as a continual thorn in the side of Caligula.
Do it.
The movie starts with him basically gaining power in a corrupt way. He doesn't kill Tiberius, but he allows he kills the guy who kills the guy. The general who pledges his life. Yeah, the general of like the Roman Legion, the Praetorian Guard, whatever they're called. He pledges himself to Caligula. That's when he sticks his hand in the flame, and he stands there with his hand in the flame. Yeah. And then Tiberius is dying. Caligula believes he's dead, goes and retrieves the ring off Tiberius's hand, and Tiberius wakes up, not quite dead yet, demands the ring back. Caligula doesn't want to give it back. He's already assumed the mantle of Caesar, the Emperor of Rome. And Macros comes in, the general of the guard. He comes in and, having pledged himself to Caligula, murders Tiberius. Caligula takes up the mantle, and then his first, I like that name, Tiberius. One of his first moves as emperor, as Caesar, is to accuse Macros of the murder of Tiberius, and which I guess he was guilty in.
Drama alert.
But didn't reveal to the rest of the Roman people that he, was a party to it, and, murders Macros in this odd execution scene, which out of there's a few scenes
out to me in
this movie, and one of them is
I had a name in my mind for it. It was the murder wall. The murder wall, because basically
it was like a moving wall.
It was like a moving wall, and
with blades on it. It had
sides,
lawnmower.
Sides that were circling around.
And
unlike the dildo bike in the beginning.
It's a vagina licking machine. I think is what it was. Okay. It was like the woman.
See, this is what your taxpayer dollars are going to.
There's a woman pedaling the wheel of this little thing that has little flappers on it, kind of like tongues, as they go up and down and lick her vagina.
I also thought you.
I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah, no, that was. But you know, I was also thinking of was it Berlusconi, the guy who had the bunga bunga parties, the prime minister of it, the prime minister of Italy. Yeah, he was like notorious for having like sex parties and stuff like that.
Yeah, so
he's a throwback.
Yeah, and so Caligula basically executes anybody in his way, and then proceeds to have massive sex parties. And towards the end there, he does the same thing even with the Senate. When he gets frustrated with the Senate, he takes all their wives, and that's perhaps the most graphic orgy scene. Yeah. Is when the wives of the senators are pleasing all of Caligula's henchmen.
And this is a 3-hour movie, mind you, and man, there was a lot of long zooms.
Just straight up shots. Yeah. Pornographic scenes.
Yeah, for real. Like, I mean, come on. Like, we were, like, you said you were, what you said? You were confused and aroused.
Yeah, something like that. It's kind of a confusing film, and most of the time you feel like you're watching a porno. Yeah. Right? But then, like, the story would jump back, the film would jump back to the story, and you're like, oh, okay, this is what's happening. And then right when the story starts flushing itself out, it's back to the pornographic scene, which is going into this movie when I was reading the critic reviews. At the time, that was what a lot of critics were frustrated with, was they were like, hey, we're trying to follow the story of this film and Caligula, and it's interesting. The story is itself a little compelling. The story of corruption and this guy killing anybody in his way, having massive orgies, but when the story gets good, then all of a sudden it just becomes this, like, rampant sex scene that kind of distracts you from what's going on. And in that regard, like, I agree with the original critics. Like, I do think that a lot of them were prudish and, you know, perhaps dismiss this film for its gratuitous use of sex. But, like, I do understand how they're like, yo, I can't follow this movie because it's too much sex. I can't follow it. I can't, you know, and I was having a hard time following this movie. I had to, as I'm watching it, I had to, like, read along with a plot summary, to be honest, because I was having a hard time being like,
I was.
Okay, what's happening here?
And because the sex is distracting.
And then it goes to rampant sex, and then it gets kind of blurry, and all of a sudden something else is happening, and you're like, wait, where are we? Last thing I remember was lots of boobs.
Well, someone that me and you have gone at ad nauseum and talking about, like, we admire as a movie critic, you know, we'd say it's an inspiration for both of us, Roger Ebert. Mm-hmm. You know, the guy,
Roger.
He's great, you know, and part of the thing that's great about him is that he's been proven, like, right when, like, there might have been, like, a hot movie that people loved, and he really was a great critic. But I was just like, I was looking at what he had written, and he was going off in the first paragraph. Let me just read this back, all right? Caligula is sickening, utterly worthless, and shameful trash. That's the first sentence.
Tough words.
Yeah, you know, people with talent allowed themselves to participate in this travesty.
Malcolm McDowell does have a lot of talent, and I think he plays the role of Caligula very well. He's played another sex-obsessed psycho in Clockwork Orange.
And I mean, he gives like,
he's great in that role.
Honestly, I'm gonna be honest. He was like he was very flamboyant. And, like, but, like, it was...
Caligula's the best part of this movie. And he's really the only memorable character. There's tons of characters. And really all I can name back to is Tiberius, Macros, the guard you killed at the beginning, and Longinus, because that's a weird name.
All right. You know what? I found the most scathing part of this review. Okay? All right. What I'm telling you now... that this film is not only garbage on an artistic level, but that it is also garbage on the crude and base level where it no doubt hopes to find its audience. Caligula is not good art. It is not good cinema. It's not good porn.
Wow.
Man, he was criticizing the porn. See? He wrote that, like, you know what I mean?
I guess it doesn't hit on any level. I don't entirely agree. I think that there is something to be said about in the film. I think the film, what it's trying to get at is Caligula's mass corruption and his overindulgence, and the film tries to place you in the position of somebody receiving an abundance of indulgence,
sure.
like
you feel stuffed, filled to the brim of fucking
the gratuitous
graphic porn.
Of the graphic sex scenes. There's a lot of very violent scenes too. The film's gory. A guy's penis gets cut off and fed the dogs. So there's a lot of violence, a lot of pornographic scenes, and a lot of scenes where Caligula's just, drunk on power, as the expression goes. Like when he sends the Roman towards the end, when they basically conspire and they're like, let's kill this guy. When he goes out there with the Roman military just to like kind of shame them and makes them get all naked and like charge into the water to attack papyrus weeds, saying that's the British and to attack them, and he's sitting there laughing with his buddy. Like the dude's clearly drunk on power, clearly massively corrupt, and overly indulged in sex and violence, and a lot of that has come to blind him in a way. And I think that's the main point this film is trying to make, is that an overindulgence of sex and violence poisons the character, so to speak, and corrupts absolutely.
But we also have to talk about the gratuitous sex scenes. Is that in doing a little bit of research for this film, I found, I think you also found this too, but that Penthouse basically added a lot more sex scenes into the movie, right, making it even more gratuitous, right, more, even against the director's own wishes, right?
I did not know that.
Yeah, like, and I think, I think that's probably one of the most damning parts about this. I mean, even Van, our friend who we were watching this with, sorry, we just outed him. But he loved it. He loved it. He was giggling the whole time. See, even Roger Ebert brings this up. He says, their scenes have been augmented by additional porn shot later with other people inserted to spice things up. Not the director, who removed his credit from the film. Not the writer. What in the world could it mean that this movie was adapted by an original screenplay by Gore Vidal? I don't know. My personal feelings about this is like, I think there's a story in there for sure. Like, I think
the movie. Sorry, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I think the movie does itself a disservice with the gratuitous pornographic films or scenes, and in that the message is trying to relay of corruption and a ruler losing his mind to indulgence, and the elite, the world of the elites being corrupted by this indulgence.
Yeah,
I think the movie loses his message in its gratuity, because all you can focus on post watching it is just like, wow, that movie was a lot of like.
Yeah, a lot of like full on like ejaculation, pissing on dead bodies. You know what I mean? It's and I've dabbled in watching certain disturbing films, and I wouldn't say it was like disturbing.
I would not say it was disturbing.
No, I wouldn't say it's disturbing. I honestly don't expect anyone listening to watch it. I don't think that there's like,
if you're gonna watch it, don't watch it with any children around in your family.
Yeah.
Is this maybe an Alone in the Tub type movie?
Yeah. But it's 3 hours. You're gonna prune up in that tub watching this.
So we could go off on a tangent talking about corruption and the powers of indulgence and vice. But for what this movie is, and how I feel like it does itself a disservice in its gratuitousness, I feel like the real question here is the role of sex and violence in film. And, so relating back to what you said originally, and I asked you this while we were watching it, But I'll ask you again now. You believe this film is what they would call an exploitation film, correct?
Yeah. I think honestly, like, you could tell which scenes were added in. Mm-hmm. It was like the ones that were like long shot, there were long drawing out scenes. All of those gratuitous porn scenes that were shot, I guarantee you those were the ones that were added later. Mm-hmm. So just looking at, like, trying to like picture in my mind with those scenes cut out, like, right, like just a regular, like, yeah, sure, there's gratuitous nudity and porn and whatnot, sure, fine, but I think it's definitely an exploitation film for sure. Just
to get the definition of exploitation film correct, I wanted, while I was watching this and I was thinking about this topic, I was like, I just want to make sure that I have the idea of an exploitation film correct in my head. So basically what an exploitation film means is that it exploits some aspect, be it sex, violence, or just shock value in order to promote itself. Well, so it basically uses...
it's like one that comes to mind is one that we watched not too long ago, but New Jack City. That was kind of like an exploitation film, but from, the 80s.
It uses trends or a topic that it knows will get people stirred up in order to basically exploit modern culture, modern society, in order to drive sales. You're saying it's like
kind of counterculture.
No, it's not counterculture in that it because it's pulling off something that is, I believe,
so it's enforcing like
mainstream, or it's just shock value. It's just shock value for the sake of promoting the movie almost.
Right. I think there's definitely a story in this movie. I think that there's something, if it was like kind of taken a little bit more seriously, and I think there is some good. There were some scenes, and like I said, the murder wall. There's like the last scene. I think the last scene was actually pretty good. I liked that. Mm-hmm. With him
when Caligula gets killed
and murdered. Yeah. And that, like, the blood going
down
the steps. He gets
assassinated. Yeah, and there's the marble white steps. They pour water on it. His blood flows down.
But back
the ending shot is his bloody face, dead face.
Yeah, but back to your point about sex in film. I mean, it's interesting. Like, if we think about just like the world we live in, right? There, especially in the United States. The United States is a very puritanical country, right?
In ways, I guess, but
there's a lot of puritanical value.
Well, sex sells, right? Yeah. And I think that's where this idea of, in regards to this movie, I guess we can talk exploitation in regards to future movies we may watch, but in this film, exploitation means that the exploited act or object is sex. This film was made in a way that people would talk about it because of the gratuitous, borderline pornographic. I mean, not even borderline.
Not even,
it's pornographic.
It's over the line.
And that
the dude gets banged by a horse.
That they exploit sex in order to sell this movie.
Right.
So the idea I'm trying to get at is how is it, what is okay for modern films, or not even modern, but films in general. Well, how much is sex okay in order to use that as a storytelling device or as a way to promote the film?
Well, there are like overtly sexual scenes in movies that I do like. Like, okay, one that comes to mind and I was thinking about was Requiem for a Dream by Darren Aronofsky, right? In the end, there is like kind of like a pornographic scene. It's not very descriptive. It doesn't show into the detail like this movie, but it's a pretty raunchy scene. I mean, they're literally shouting ass to ass, Mm-hmm. But the whole movie is, I think there's like a good trope in movies that I really like a lot is like the descent into madness. That's why like The Shining is like one of my favorite movies, and there's something about that story that just I find very fascinating. But I feel like it's been done a lot better by a lot of other directors, of course. But it was an attempt. They were attempting to do something. I just don't feel like it was a fully realized vision. But in regards to sex in film, like yeah, like in that movie, that scene is pretty graphic, but like it's shown to like show the descent of this character, right? Like and she, at the end of the day, she ends up having to sell herself because she's been taken advantage of by
in Requiem for a Dream.
Yeah. And so I honestly I'm always a fan of whatever your artistic vision is, fully realize that. If it involves
using sex as a storytelling device is one thing,
right?
Did but this film use its pornographic scenes as a storytelling device, or was this purely for the sake of, at the time in the late 70s, early 80s, was this purely just for the shock value and to get people to the theater to watch a film that was pornographic?
I think for sure this movie was sold as like trying to capitalize off of like shock value, for sure. 100%. I wouldn't even argue against that. That's like, it's very apparent.
That's why we were encouraged to watch this movie.
Yeah, no, because Van brought it up. He's like, yeah, it's like not online. You can't like even rent it. There's certain movies like that, like that one movie Before the Devil Knows You're Dead. For some reason, that movie is like so hard to find online. For some reason, you know what I mean? It's and it was for a while, but so like sometimes there's just like available, like with copyright law and like shit like that. Sometimes they're unavailable, but this was claimed as a very what was on the cover, like a very like it was banned, and it's like a very controversial movie. Like Van, like he said that on the way out. It's like, oh, it's the most controversial movie ever. And I'm like, that's just a byline, dude. That's just a selling line. But yeah.
So did they exploit this?
Yeah, they did. Question. They for sure did.
Like, is this movie made to tell the story of corruption and overindulgence, or was this here to be a pornographic film?
I think that that there is definitely a lot. It was very. Hold on, sorry. Cut here. I think there was a very there was a lot of exploitation for sure, but I think they did use the sex to like as like a plot. It's a plot device for sure, but I think there is a story in there. I think there is some merit to this movie. I don't think this movie is completely without merit. I wouldn't say, like, I wouldn't go as hard as Roger Ebert, but like he was saying in his review, like he's not like clutching his pearls. He's just like, this is just, it's, I can understand for its length as well. If it was a shorter movie, I could see it maybe not being as maybe not liked, or because that also plays a factor. Length of the movie. If you're gonna, this is an older movie, and a lot of older movies, they're they tend to be a little bit longer for sure. But for the long time, I can understand there being even with people who are okay with it, with there being a burnout, which, weirdly in a way is kind of like reinforcing one of the themes of the movie, is that like he became burnt out. The guy like literally just like escalated with sex, it's just like, it was just like, oh, whatever's taboo as is like shown to be like a, like, yeah, like it says on the back of it, like it's a descent into madness film. I do think it's that way, but I think that he was already pretty crazy at the beginning.
Definitely. Well, in regards to sex and its place in our modern Western media, I think what I like about this film, if this film is an exploitation film, I think it's better than most exploitation films I've seen, in that I think it forces a little bit of it forces us to hold up with the audience, that is, to hold up a little bit of a mirror to ourselves and be like, yo, like, what are we okay with?
Yeah,
that's a good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah, and so I think that this film forces us to ask that question, like, how far can we go with sex in a film that's supposed to be a, in theatrical release, and
oh my God, I could not imagine watching this movie in a theater full of other people.
And watch for a narrative reason, and watch for an artistic reason. I think this film does a good job of holding a mirror to us and being like, is this too far? Is this not enough? And I think that it does a good job of capitalizing on the idea of sex sells, in that it just is like, all right, sex sells, like, but really how much does it? And it really pushes that boundary of using sex as both a plot point and a selling point for the film, and it pushes it into levels that I think most films are afraid to, or just would refuse to, because, like, really, how deep can you go? You watch most movies, even a sex scene is like a silhouette, scene of people.
A sultry jazz solo in the background.
But this one just goes straight up, and it depicts penetration. Like, there's hardcore porn.
It's
in this film, and so
I can definitely see, like, where you're coming from, but, like, the fact that I know, like, that they're, like, and this is just, like, across the board, like, this has been done in other movies. Like, one, for example, that comes to mind is Louis C.K. directed this movie, Pootie Tang. Mm-hmm. You've seen it before?
No,
you haven't. Oh, it's good.
Never heard of it.
It's actually funny enough, kind of an exploitation film in a certain way. But the interesting about that movie is that basically Louis C.K. was fired, and then they edited the movie after he was fired, right?
Yeah.
So I think I'm not going to judge the director on this, because the fact that there was like some, like one of the backers of this movie, Penthouse, one of the producers, they edited it out. So it's hard for me to be like, okay, this is the director's full vision, because it was proven that they tampered with it after.
Really?
One, they added pornographic scenes, like I was saying before.
But those scenes were shot by the original directors.
But they were saying that there were more pornographic scenes shot afterwards to splice in between the stuff that was already shot. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really?
And so in a way, like, I feel like that kind of, like, bastardizes the vision of the director, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, I'm all for, you do whatever you need to do to get the point that you want to get across in your film. A film is a statement, right? A film is like, this is, a lot of work goes into a film. Like,
of course.
You know what I mean? So, like, I don't want to, like, shit on this movie. I'm not going to, because I do see that there's, like, some kind of story in there. But, like I said, like you bringing that up, like, I can definitely get that for sure. Like, holding a mirror up, I think that might have been one of the director's intent.
It exploits. It's called exploitation because it exploits something that's popular in American society, which is sex and violence. And this movie's just like, America wants sex and violence. Like, here you go. Here is that to the nth degree.
Right. But the fact that there were scenes added after, it's kind of hard to like sort that out. Like, I'm trying to, in my mind, like, cut out those scenes and, like, be like, okay, the director's vision, this, his movie. But it's hard. It's hard because, fucking a company got in the way, and, like I said, might have bastardized the director's original vision. Mm-hmm. Because I think that would be that is a very interesting.
How long after did they, like, cut these scenes in?
I don't know.
Was this, like, immediately after release, or did this movie get released and they're all like, oh, yo, the porno scenes are stirring up a lot of drama, let's add even more in order to push the conversation about this film? because I could see that happening, like that this film was already very pornographic, and it's released, it's received in a way that people are like, oh my god, like, you know, there's so much sex and like graphic sex in this film, and like, how can anybody want to watch this? And but then that attracts attention, obviously, especially in America, especially in the Western society, sex sells. And so more and more people are like, let's watch this. And then Penthouse turns around long after the fact, let's say maybe a year or two, couple of years, and they're like, yo, just fucking even at it more. You just go full out. Like, just put in as much as we can. Well, that.
You know, like I was saying before, though, like, the director removed his name. He didn't want the credit. So with sex and violence, yeah, I think, you know, there is something to be said about that, though, in America. You know, I mean, think about like
media.
I mean, the reason the FCC had a giant
sex and violence is a main selling point and a main topic of so much Western media.
100%. And you know, and what I think comes to mind is the Super Bowl halftime show where Janet Jackson got her breast revealed on the Super Bowl. Mm-hmm. It was, you know, it basically emboldened the FCC to be like, all right, you know, it gave them a bunch more funding after that, and the crackdown on TV. There was a huge crackdown on, you know, media and film release you know what I mean, after that, like, yeah. Especially with live performances, there had to be like a delay in case they cut away in case something like that happens. You know, so I think it's definitely something.
That was just one boob revealed.
That was just one titty. Just one titty.
This movie had a lot more than one titty.
Yeah, I know. And, you know, I think the point you're bringing up is totally valid. I'm not even arguing about that. I think that, you know, it is something that we kind of have to, like, see within ourselves and, like, you know, like, kind of like, yeah, like, kind of put a mirror up to it. Be like, but a part of you is kind of like titillated by like sex and violence, and you know, mm-hmm. and you know,
that's what brought us to this movie. Yeah. Is we knew it was a heavily graphic film,
yeah, and
we were interested in seeing it because of that,
yeah,
you know,
yeah, but you know, at the end of the day, I do think that, you know, we do have to like kind of reconsider like our whole, because the thing is that's crazy is that gratuitous violence is almost okay though. Like if you okay, like let's just say like the sex was a little bit more vague, right? It wasn't as graphic in these movies, right? But it was still present, but it just had a bunch of violence. It would be completely fine.
Oh yeah,
it would be completely fine.
If this movie was released with way less sex and the same amount, if even more violence, yeah, it would be completely fine.
Yeah,
which is a weird.
It's a weird double standard that, you know, that like is like kind of upheld by America, is like, you know, like
American media
that, you know, it's okay to have gratuitous violence, like, you know, like
heads getting chopped off, yeah, disembowelments.
I mean, and you know, and think about you know how like one of the things I remember vividly in my mind is when we saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and at the end where it has the very graphic scene, very graphic violent scene where, you know, the culminating scene, mm-hmm. the end scene, there was a pop in the audience. It was a pop. It elicited a very visceral reaction, right? And there's something to be said that when you see like extreme violence, it titillates almost the same part that also is like extreme sexual, you know, extreme sex, you know, and stuff like that. Mm. You know, I think that it's definitely like I think it's weird. You know, it's like we're not okay with, you know, people showing their bodies and all this stuff, but we're okay with crazy violence,
mutilation, and the such.
Yeah, yeah, you know, it's wild. It's, you know,
it's always one of those weird subjects in American media, you know, where it's like we're okay with seeing. I think this was the guy that wrote the Game of Thrones books, Song of Ice and Fire,
George R.R. Martin.
Yeah, I think he even said something in regards to the original seasons of Game of Thrones where people were like, oh, there's a lot of sex in this, and the TV show was originally criticized on its use of sex, and he was like, so we're all right with seeing the axes go into the heads but not the penises go into the vaginas. Like, what's up with that?
You know, it's weird. It's a weird value that I feel like kind of shows like kind of how stuck behind bullshit so-called family values and shit like that. Like I feel
where
like
obviously we all know violence and murder and death is a lot more negative than anything sex related, right?
Yeah, of course. But I think part of the thing about being a person is that you have to kind of reckon with your human nature somewhat, right? And there's a lot of instances in human nature where there's extreme violence and stuff like that, and I think you need to know thyself. I think that's maybe a story, a theme you could take from the movie, because when you give into your vice like Caligula, you end up in a very dark state, and that's and I'm not saying like vice like sin, I'm just saying like giving into like the more carnal nature of being human rather than being civilized. I mean, whenever he was trying to do his job as emperor, he was like, this is boring. Like when he had to stamp all of the bills and shit.
Yeah.
All right,
so final thoughts on this one?
Yeah.
All right,
I'll go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Well, where I enjoyed the uniqueness of this movie, because I'll give it that. It's unique. It's not like anything you would see going to the movie theater. Like, there's not a movie I can remember seeing in theaters, or even it just at any time that is like this movie. So I would give it praise for that, in that it's just a different film, and it forces you to kind of be uncomfortable a lot of times. It forces you to be uncomfortable. It forces you to be like, wait a second, like, is this a movie or am I watching porn? I think that's very different and interesting about the direction of this film. I think that its story that it attempts to tell is also kind of fun in how Caligula's overindulging in sex and violence, and perhaps how that holds a mirror up to modern Western audiences and saying that, hey, or perhaps our audiences too indulged in sex and violence? Is this movie easily exploited? Is sex and violence easily exploited and a tool for indulgence and making profit than it is like just a normal human act? I think that's interesting too. But this storyline that was trying to be told, the storyline of the madness and corruption of Caligula and the madness and corruption of the Roman Senate, I think a lot of that is lost in translation in this film. And where it's a fun movie to watch with some buddies, to just be like, wow, that's pretty wild. Yeah. Like, it's also a film that just leaves a lot to be wanted. And so out of all the movies we've reviewed so far, this is, I'll just say this has been my least favorite, but also the one where I've seen something in a film where I don't think I would see it anywhere else. Like, we haven't seen any movie that's quite this graphic, and I doubt we'll watch one anytime soon.
No.
That's this graphic. So I'm like kind of stuck in the middle, where I think like its gratuitousness of sex and violence is like exhilarating and unique in a lot of ways, and forces us to question how much sex and violence we accept in our media. But I think a lot of the story and a lot of the themes of the film are lost in the sauce of sex and violence.
And trust me, there was a lot of fluids going around.
I'm gonna have to leave this film with like a 5 out of 10 at best.
So
I won't say I hate it, but I would not put this film anywhere near any of my favorite films. I think it has its place in Western media and Western film in terms of its sexual content and its value as a controversial film. I don't think it's countercultural. You asked me that earlier. I think it's countercultural, no, and maybe I would give a little bit to that, and that I think just like very few films would be so bold as to just be like, yeah, this is like porn and a film in one, and I don't see that too often, but you know, it leaves a lot to be wanted, so yeah, I'm gonna have to give this one a 5 out of 10.
Alright, I guess I'll go. So yeah, I feel like I've said a lot of how I feel about this. You know, I do take into consideration the fact that it was tampered with afterwards. The fact that the artist who originally created this removed their name along with the writer, removed their name from this movie. You know, I think that says kind of a lot about how, and you know, and that's honestly a sad thing. I hate when art gets bastardized from I like seeing someone's pure vision, you know, even if it's shit, you know, like, yeah, you can watch The Room and be like, okay, yeah, this is some fucking bullshit, but like, you're like, at least this is Tommy Wiseau's vision. This is, you know what I mean? Mm. And so I would like to see the version that actually didn't have all like the crazy sex scenes where it's like, okay, this is over the top, you know what I mean? But it's not like I'm clutching my pearls, you know, like it's like you said. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say we watched the uncut version for the record.
For the record, yeah. So on that basis, and also the story. A lot of times I found myself like, who's this guy again? Like, what's going on? And that's
it would literally get lost in the sauce.
Yeah,
so
and
like, wait, what's happening?
I think that's kind of a bad thing for a movie to do. You know, when the story gets mired in kind of like the gimmick of the movie, you know. So, with that being said, I do give it points for, like, you know, like there were some scenes that were very were interesting, like kind of, very like stylized, and I do kind of like the lo-fi aspect to it, you know what I mean? I do like seeing stuff that's like kind of rough around the edges. So, I mean, I do give it points for that, but there's a lot that it's not. I can't say it's a good movie, right? There's some good stuff in it. There's some scenes, like I said, that I think are kind of they're cool. Like the murder wall scene, like legitimately, like the prop looked cool. Like the whole scene looked like a very very interesting. You know what I mean? Also, one thing I will say is that I felt like there like none of like the everywhere where the scenes were shot, like it all felt like there wasn't a variation in the places that they went in this movie. You know, it's always like some like obscure place where there's just a bunch of people are having sex, or you know, like his personal chambers where there's like you remember like the part where like there's the two girls who are like looking through a peephole watching.
Yeah, there's a lot of this in a lot of the sex scenes. You'd be like, what is up with that?
Yeah.
It just seems like it's just there just for the sake of it. You know?
Yeah, there's too many facepalm moments for me in this movie to say it's a good movie. I'm probably not gonna rewatch it again, to be honest. Not that, like I said, I hated it. It's just
unless I was getting late and I just wanted to put on something horny enough to get the mood going, but not just straight on porno.
Yeah, so I do kind of want to like I think that in the future we should kind of like look at movies that are like kind of like there's 50-50. There's a lot of because I think that encourages, interesting discussion for sure.
I will say, I'm sorry to cut you off again. I will say I do believe this is an exploitation film. It's an exploitation of sex.
Yeah. No, and so I probably, like, for creativity points, I'll give it like up to 6, but then minusing some of the
creativity and uniqueness.
Yeah, creativity. It's up there for sure. It's like, I'd even maybe say like a 7 for that. But like with all of this stuff that I have a problem with, like the way, like even with the director's original vision, the plot line to follow in this movie shouldn't be that difficult, but for some reason it is. Yeah. And like I said, I think it's the fact that there's just too much sex in this goddamn movie. So I kind of have to minus a decent amount of points off of that. So I'm left at like kind of like a 4, honestly, like maybe like a strong 4. Mm-hmm. But like, so I'd say it's like slightly below average, the cut that we've seen
in terms of the movie.
Yeah. So I think we should also say like our rating scale, like 5 is average.
Yeah.
Right, and 10's like really good, and then like 1's bad, obviously.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? It's
like, I think this is a better film than most of the garbage that's turned out
for sure
in our modern day theaters. Yeah. I guess that's for the viewer to decide.
Yeah.
But
so if in
terms of art films, it's solid. It's better than a movie you just watch. It's better than a John Wick or a Marvel film, but it's. Bob's gonna give me a look. It's an art film for sure, but in terms of art films, it falls a little short.
Yeah, I agree, and I enjoy art film a lot, and I can appreciate that, but at the end of the day, it just didn't really. It didn't engulf me. It just kind of was just like, it was just pure shock value at a certain point. So, yeah, I think, if you do decide to watch this movie, like I said, know that, like, if whoever's around you, just know that, I mean, there's going to be a lot of sex.
Don't watch this with your mom.
Yeah, do not.
The end scene's cool. The ending shot is cool.
Yeah.
There's some cool moments. There's definitely some cool moments.
But it's not enough to put it above average for me.
No.
So, interesting watch. I'll say that. But at the end of the day, I feel, you can leave, like, if you're curious,
watch it if you're having an orgy. Put it on the background of your next orgy party. Put it on the background.
Yeah. So, yeah, you freak bitches. Anyway, so yeah, I think that does it for us. So Caligula. Okay. All right, take it easy.
Thanks for listening.